The final battle did not take place at Earth as everyone expected. Instead, it happened at Valoris, the champion's homeworld, where everything had begun. Human coalition fleets surrounded the planet that had launched 1,000 conquests. Marshal Tay, young, stood on his command ship's bridge watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for the ultimate confrontation. The irony was not lost on him. The champions who had conquered through overwhelming force now faced overwhelming force themselves. Hundreds of ships from dozens of different worlds filled space around Valoris. Each ship represented a species the champions had once defeated, now united under human leadership. Admiral Ji-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the champion's final stronghold. He felt no joy in this moment, only sadness at the terrible cost of war. Both sides had lost so much in this conflict, but it was necessary. The galaxy could not remain under champion's tyranny. Before the battle began, Ji-ho did something that shocked everyone, including his own officers. He opened a communication channel to Marshal Tae-young, offering one final chance for peace. "We are not here for revenge." Admiral Ji-ho said, his image appearing on champion screens across the system. "We are here to offer you the same choice you offered us. Surrender and your people will be spared. Resist and face the consequences." The words echoed across space. The same demand for surrender that champions had made to hundreds of worlds. But now the roles were reversed. Now the conquered had become the conquerors and the mighty had fallen. Tae-young felt the weight of galactic history in that moment. His ancestors had built an empire through strength and conquest. They had believed that might made right, that the strong were destined to rule the weak. But these humans had proven that even the mightiest could fall. "Never," he replied, though his voice lacked its former confidence. "We are champions. We do not surrender to anyone. Then you have chosen your fate." Ji-ho said sadly, "May history remember that we offered mercy." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The champions fought with the desperate courage of those who knew they faced extinction. Their ships were the finest ever built, their warriors, the most skilled, their weapons the most powerful. But they fought alone while their enemies fought together. The coalition used tactics that blended the military traditions of 30 different species, Altarian speed combined with Korvax durability and Zentari precision, all coordinated by human strategic brilliance. Captain Su-bin found herself commanding the champion's final reserve. She launched her ships against a formation of coalition fighters, knowing she faced impossible odds. The enemy pilots included species from across the galaxy, all trained in human academies, all fighting for the same cause. As her fighter dueled with coalition craft among the burning wreckage of champion ships, Su-bin realized something that shook her to her core. She was no longer fighting primitives or lucky amateurs. She was fighting warriors who had learned to be better than champions themselves. The pilots she faced flew with skill that matched her own, but they also flew with something the champions had lost: hope. They believed in their cause, in their alliance, in their vision of a free galaxy. Champions fought for pride and conquest, but these warriors fought for the future. Admiral Hyojin led the champions' final assault on the coalition flagship. Her massive battleship closed with Ji-ho's command vessel in a duel that would decide the fate of worlds. The two ships exchanged devastating fire while smaller craft swarmed around them like angry insects, but even Hyojin could see the battle was lost. Champions' forces were being overwhelmed on every front. Their perfect tactics meant nothing against enemies who had learned all their secrets. Their superior technology was matched by coalition ships built with captured champions' knowledge. The end came not with a glorious last stand, but with a simple transmission. Marshal Tae-young appeared on every screen in the system, his proud face showing defeat for the first time in his life. "I surrender," he said. The message traveled across the galaxy faster than the champions could stop it. Humans had forced the mighty champions to retreat, not once, but twice. Worlds that had surrendered without a fight began to whisper dangerous words. What if the champions could be beaten? What if their empire was not eternal after all on the planet? Altair former Captain Quan Su, who had surrendered his world years ago, heard the news with growing excitement. If these humans could make the champions retreat, maybe his people could fight back too. He began secretly meeting with other resistance leaders, planning something that would have been unthinkable. Weeks before, similar meetings happened on dozens of worlds across the champion's empire. The cracks in their perfect control were spreading, and Supreme Marshal Tae Young knew his empire faced its greatest crisis since its founding. Colonel Dong Hyun, the champion's best military analyst, stood before the War Council with troubling reports. Sir, the rebellions are small now, but they are growing. If we cannot defeat the humans quickly, our entire empire may collapse. Then we will not allow that to happen. Tae Young replied coldly, "Bring me everything we know about human warfare. I want to understand how they fight so we can crush them properly." What Dong Hyun discovered in human history files shocked the entire champion's leadership. Humans had been fighting wars for over 10,000 years. They had developed hundreds of different fighting styles, strategies, and tactics. They had fought in deserts and forests, on land and sea, with primitive weapons and advanced technology. Every human conflict had taught them new lessons about warfare. They had learned to fight when outnumbered, outgunned, and desperate. They had mastered the art of turning weakness into strength, defeat into victory. They treated war itself as a learning experience. They do not fight to win quickly, Dong Hyun explained to the assembled commanders. They fight to keep fighting. Every defeat teaches them something new. Every loss makes them stronger. The longer a battle lasts, the more dangerous they become. This revelation horrified the champions, who were used to quick, decisive victories. They had never fought an enemy that grew stronger through defeat. Their entire military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and rapid conquest. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Yoon Seo prepared for the champions' return. She knew they would study human tactics and develop countermeasures, so she had to stay ahead of them. Human engineers worked day and night developing new weapons and strategies. The humans did something the champions found impossible to understand. They shared all their knowledge freely. Every discovery made by one group was immediately given to everyone else. When human scientists on Mars developed a new missile design, the plans were sent to every other human base within hours. Captain Subin, now promoted after her experiences in the first battle, led a new champion's assault. Her ships had been equipped with new sensors designed to detect hidden human bases and faster engines to catch the mobile human fighters. But when the champions returned to Earth, they found the humans had evolved again. The defenders no longer used simple hit-and-run tactics. Instead, they coordinated their attacks like a swarm of insects moving as one organism. Thousands of small human ships surrounded the champions' fleet like a cloud of metal wasps. Each ship was tiny and weak, but together they created a storm of weapons fire that no shields could completely stop. The champions found themselves in the center of a tornado of destruction. Admiral Jiho had studied every champion's battle recording available. He understood their formations, their communication patterns, their standard responses. Human tactical computers predicted champions' moves before they made them, turning the enemy's strength into weakness. The battle was unlike anything either side had experienced. The champions tried to use their new countermeasures, but the humans adapted to them in real time. When champions' ships moved to avoid swarm attacks, human forces changed to linear assaults. When champions tried to jam communications, humans switched to quantum-encrypted channels. Lieutenant Yuna, now commanding her own destroyer, watched in amazement as human tactics shifted and flowed like water. They seemed to know what the champions would do before the champions knew themselves. It was as if they were fighting an enemy that could read their minds. "Sir," she reported to Admiral Hyo Jin, "the humans are countering every move we make. They are adapting faster than our computers can calculate new strategies." "How is that possible?" Hyo Jin demanded. "They are just primitives with basic technology." But the humans were no longer primitive. They had captured champions' equipment during previous battles and reverse-engineered everything. They had improved champions' technology, making it faster, smaller, more efficient. Human engineers had taken the best of champions' science and made it better. Dr. Park Min, leading the human research effort, had made breakthrough after breakthrough in understanding champions' technology. Their weapons used too much energy. Their armor had weak points. Their shields created electromagnetic signatures that could be tracked. Human improvements eliminated these flaws. The battle lasted 36 hours. Both sides fought with desperate intensity, but the humans had one critical advantage: they were not afraid to lose. Every sacrifice taught them something new about their enemies. Every destroyed ship revealed champions' weaknesses. The champions who had always expected quick victory found themselves in a grinding war of attrition. They had more ships and firepower, but humans had something more dangerous. They had the will to keep fighting no matter how hopeless things seemed, as casualties mounted on both sides. Marshal Tae-young made a disturbing discovery. Human forces were not just defending Earth. They were using the battle to prepare for something much larger. Long-range sensors detected human ships in deep space far from the battle area. Captain Min-ho brought the intelligence report to Tae-young's. "Attention, sir, our scouts have found human fleets moving through our territory. They appear to be studying our bases and supply lines." "Impossible," Tae-young replied. "They barely have enough ships to defend their own world. How can they have forces in our space?" The answer was both simple and terrifying. While the champions focused all their attention on conquering Earth, human strike teams had been secretly moving through champions' territory. They had been observing, studying, learning about every aspect of the Empire. General Yoon Seo had planned this from the beginning. The defense of Earth was just phase 1 of a much larger strategy. Phase 2 would take the fight to the champions themselves. Human forces had spent months infiltrating enemy territory, mapping weaknesses, and preparing for coordinated strikes. The humans had learned something the champions never understood. War was not just about ships and weapons. It was about information, intelligence, and understanding your enemy better than they understood themselves. As the battle around Earth continued, human fleets struck champions' bases across 12 different star systems. They hit supply depots, communication centers, and isolated garrison forces. The attacks were perfectly coordinated, striking at the exact moments when champions' attention was focused on the Earth. Battle reports flooded into champions' headquarters. Bases under attack, supply lines cut, communications disrupted. What had started as a simple conquest of one primitive world had become a galaxy-spanning conflict. The champions found themselves fighting a completely different kind of war. Instead of one desperate world trying to survive, they faced a coordinated campaign across multiple star systems. Human forces appeared everywhere, striking weak points and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Lieutenant Colonel Jae-min, serving at Champion Central Command, watched the reports with growing alarm. "Sir, the humans are not just defending anymore, they are attacking. They have somehow turned this entire war into their advantage." Marshal Tae-young stared at the tactical displays showing champions' bases under assault across half the galaxy. These humans had done something impossible. They had taken a hopeless defensive battle and turned it into a coordinated offensive. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. Human forces were not fighting alone. They had somehow convinced other species to join them. Liberated worlds were providing ships, soldiers, and intelligence. The humans had turned the champions' greatest strength, their vast empire, against them. The galaxy that had trembled before champions might now rallied behind human leadership. Species that had been conquered were eager to fight alongside the liberators. Every champion's victory had created enemies, but human victories were creating allies. The champions who ruled through fear and force found themselves facing enemies who fought for hope and freedom. It was a kind of warfare they had never encountered and did not know how to counter. Their perfect military machine was being challenged by something they had never expected: organized rebellion. The war that began as Earth's last stand had become something far greater. It had become a galactic revolution with humans leading the charge against tyranny. The champions faced their greatest crisis, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the age of champions' rule was finally coming to an end. The massive black ship cut through space like a knife through water. Its hull stretched for miles, covered in weapons that could destroy entire cities. Commander Hyojin stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars with cold satisfaction. Another world had fallen today. Another species had learned to fear the name of the galactic champions. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of machines. Captain Min-ho worked at his station, checking reports from across their vast empire. Every number told the same story: Victory after victory after victory. The champions had not lost a single battle in over 3 years. They had conquered 47 star systems and hundreds of billions of people. All bowed before their might. Hyojin was tall and strong like all champions. Her black uniform was covered with medals showing her many victories. She had led battles on 20 different worlds and never once had she retreated. The thought of defeat was so foreign to her that she could barely imagine what it would feel like. Min-ho looked up from his screen. "Sir, the Altarian fleet is gone. They lost half their ships in the first 20 minutes. The rest are running away like scared animals," good Hyojin said without emotion. "That makes 3 fleets this week. The galaxy is learning that resistance is useless. Send word to Supreme Marshal Tae-young. Tell him the Altarian sector is now ours. The champions came from a world called Valoris, where war was the only thing that mattered. Every child learned to fight before they could properly walk. Every adult served in the military until they died. The weak were cast out and only the strong survived. This created a race of perfect warriors who knew only how to win. Their technology was beyond anything else in the galaxy. Their ships moved faster than light itself. Their weapons could crack planets in half. Their armor could stop any attack. Their scientists had spent 1,000 years making better ways to kill and conquer. Nothing could stand against them. Supreme Marshal Tae-young ruled the champions from his palace ship, a vessel so large it had its own cities inside. He was the greatest warrior who had ever lived. He had conquered more worlds than any 10 other champions combined. His word was law, and his law was simple: expand or die. The champions believed they were chosen by fate to rule the galaxy. Every species they met was weaker than them. Every world they found was easy to take. They followed the same pattern. Every time, send scouts to study the enemy. Send diplomats to demand surrender. If surrender was refused, send the war fleets to destroy everything. It always worked. The same way every single time. Most species gave up the moment they saw a champion's ship. Others tried to fight but were crushed within hours. The longest battle in Champions history had lasted exactly 6 hours and 12 minutes against a coalition of 12 different alien races working together. Even united, they had fallen. Quickly, Lieutenant Yu Na entered the bridge carrying data tablets. Her young face showed the same cold confidence that all champions wore. She had been born into victory and knew nothing else. "Sir," she said, handing the tablets to Hyojin. "Intelligence. Reports from the outer sectors." Hyojin scanned the information quickly. More surrenders. More new territories added to the empire. More resources flowing back to Valoris. The war machine grew stronger with every conquest. Soon they would control the entire galaxy, and then they would look beyond to other galaxies. But there was something new in the reports. Something that made Hyojin pause for just a moment. A small, yellow star system at the edge of explored space. The scouts had found a blue-green world orbiting it. A world full of strange creatures who called themselves humans. The initial reports were not impressive. The humans had basic space travel, but nothing compared to Champion's technology. Their ships were tiny and primitive. Their weapons were weak. Their planet's defenses looked like toys. The scouts estimated that conquest would take less than 2 hours, yet something about the human response bothered Hyojin. When the champion scouts had sent the usual surrender demand, the Wabo, humans had replied with just 3 words: "Come and take it." Most species begged for mercy or tried to negotiate. Some offered tribute or alliance, but the humans had simply issued a challenge, as if they thought they could actually win against the mighty champions. It was almost amusing. Min-ho noticed her expression. "Sir, is something wrong with the human sector?" Hyojin shook her head. "No, Captain. Just another primitive species that thinks courage can overcome superior firepower. They will learn. Better soon enough. Prepare the 3rd battle fleet. We will handle this personally." The 3rd battle fleet was one of the Champion's most powerful forces. 50 massive warships, each one capable of destroying a moon. Thousands of smaller fighters and bombers. 1 million elite soldiers ready for planetary invasion. It was enough force to conquer most star systems. single-handedly. As the fleet prepared to depart, Hyo Jin found herself thinking about the humans again. She had read their history files. In the scouts' reports, they were a young species barely 10,000 years old. They had spent most of that time fighting each other in primitive wars with crude weapons. The humans had never faced a real enemy, an enemy with technology beyond their understanding, an enemy that had perfected war over millennia, an enemy that had never known defeat. They would break quickly once they saw what they were truly facing. Supreme Marshal Tae-young appeared on the main screen, his scarred face showing approval. "Good work, Commander. The humans will be another easy victory for our glorious empire. Show them the price of defying the champions. Make them an example for any other species foolish enough to resist." "Yes." Marshal Hyo Jin replied. "The humans will surrender or they will be destroyed. There is no third option, but far away on the small blue world called Earth, something different was happening. President Jae-won sat in an emergency meeting with his top military leaders. General Yoon Seo spread star charts across the table showing the champions advance toward their solar system. "We have maybe 6 months before they reach us." Jae-won said, his voice steady despite the terrible news. "Our scouts report they have never lost a battle. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Their fleets outnumber us 1,000 to 1. General Yoon Seo was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had fought in every major human conflict for the past 30 years. She knew war in ways the champions could not imagine. "Yes, Mr. President," she said quietly. "But they have never fought humans before. What difference does that make?" Admiral Park asked. "We cannot match their ships or weapons. How can we possibly win?" Yoon Seo smiled a cold smile that would have impressed even a champion. "Because they expect us to fight like everyone else. They expect us to surrender when we see their power. They expect us to break when they show overwhelming force. But humans do not break. We bend, we learn, we adapt, and we never give up." The room fell silent as her words sank in. The champions had conquered the galaxy by being stronger and more advanced than everyone else. But strength and technology were not everything. Humans had learned that lesson over thousands of years of fighting each other. "We will not meet them in open battle," Yoon Seo continued. "That would be suicide. Instead, we will do what humans have always done when facing a stronger enemy. We will make them pay for every inch. We will turn their strength against them. We will make them fight a kind of war they have never seen before." The champions believed war was about having the biggest guns and the strongest armor, but humans knew war was about will, about refusing to quit, even when everything seemed hopeless. They had learned this lesson in 100 conflicts across their history. As the champions prepared their mighty fleet for another easy conquest, the humans prepared for something very different. They prepared for a war where victory would not go to the strongest but to the one who could learn and adapt the fastest. The champions were about to face an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered, an enemy that treated every defeat as a lesson, every loss as fuel for the next battle, an enemy that had spent its entire history learning how to fight against impossible odds. The greatest military force in galactic history was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the one with the most power, but the one with the most determination to keep fighting no matter what. In the darkness of space, the champions' fleet moved toward Earth, confident in their inevitable victory. They had no idea they were flying toward the beginning of the end of their empire. Captain Subin stood on the command deck of her massive warship, watching the small blue planet grow larger on her screens. The third battle fleet had arrived at the edge of the human solar system, and everything looked exactly as expected. A primitive world with weak defenses and tiny ships that looked like toys compared to champions' vessels. The fleet spread out in perfect formation, 12 enormous warships, each one 5 miles long, and covered with enough weapons to level continents. Subin had led dozens of conquests, and this one looked easier than most. The humans had only 50 small ships defending their world. It would be over in minutes. Prepare the surrender demand. Subin ordered her communications officer. Send it on all frequencies. Make sure every human can hear it. The message went out across space in the ancient ritual the champions had used for centuries. This is Captain Subin of the Galactic Champions. Your world is now claimed by the Eternal Empire. Surrender immediately, and your people will be spared. Resist and your planet will burn. Subin expected the usual response: panic, fear, desperate pleas for mercy or quick submission. Instead, the humans replied with words that made her laugh. Come and take it. The same words that had puzzled Commander Hyojin weeks earlier. Subin shook her head at human foolishness. They actually thought they could fight the champions. It was almost sad how naive they were. Signal the fleet. Subin commanded, all ships attack formation. Alpha destroy their pathetic defense force but leave the planet intact. We want prisoners to question. The champions' ships moved forward like a wall of death. Their weapons charged, their shields glowing with power. Admiral Jiho watched from his command ship near Earth's moon as the enemy approached his small fleet. Looked hopeless against such overwhelming force. But Jiho was not the same kind of commander as Subin. He had studied every champion's battle recorded by their scouts. He knew exactly how the champions fought. They always used the same tactics: overwhelming firepower and direct assault. They had never needed to do anything else because it always worked. The champions expected the humans to form a defensive line and try to fight, ship to ship. They expected a heroic last stand that would end quickly when human ships were destroyed. But Jiho had no intention of fighting the way the champions expected. Break formation, he ordered. Scatter pattern 7. Execute immediately. The human ship suddenly broke apart, flying in all directions. Some dove toward the planet, others raced for the asteroid belt. Still others disappeared behind the moon. It was not retreat. It was something the champions had never seen before. Subin stared at her screens in confusion. What are they doing? Where are they going? Her weapons officer looked equally puzzled. Captain, they are not following any recognizable battle pattern. Should we pursue all of them? Subin snapped. Chase down every ship, destroy them all. But chasing 50 targets going in different directions was nothing like the champions' usual battles. Their perfect formation became useless when there was no enemy formation to fight. Their massive ships were built for power, not speed. The smaller human vessels danced around them, using asteroids and debris as cover. A group of human fighters suddenly appeared from behind a large asteroid, firing at the champion's flagship, then disappearing again before return fire could hit them. Another group struck from the opposite direction, hitting engines and weapon ports, then vanishing into space. This was not how battles were supposed to work. The champions had overwhelming force, but their enemies refused to stand still and be destroyed. Instead, the humans hit and ran like insects stinging a giant, then flying away before they could be swatted. Lieutenant Sangmin reported from the sensor station. Captain, we are taking damage. Minor hits, but they are targeting specific systems. They seem to know our weak points. Impossible, Subin replied. How could primitives know championship designs? But the attacks continued. Human ships appeared, struck quickly at joints between armor plates or cooling vents, then disappeared before the champions could respond effectively. It was like fighting smoke. Every time the champions turned to face an attack, the humans were already gone, striking somewhere else. The battle dragged on for 2 hours, then 4, then 6. The champions had never fought for so long against such a weak enemy. They were supposed to crush all resistance in minutes, but the humans kept fighting, kept moving, kept learning communications. Officer Dae-sung called out, Captain, the humans are broadcasting something on all channels. Put it through, Subin ordered. Admiral Jiho's voice filled the bridge, calm and steady. You fight well, champions, but you fight like you always have. We fight like we must. What does that mean? Subin demanded, but the human transmission had ended. The battle. Continued. Human losses were heavy. They lost ship after ship to the champions' superior firepower, but every loss seemed to teach them something new. They adapted their tactics, changed their patterns, found new ways to exploit champions' weaknesses. Commander Park Jin noticed it first. Captain, they are learning our firing patterns. Each attack is more precise than the last. Su-bin felt something she had never experienced before in battle. Uncertainty. The humans were supposed to be crushed by. Now their world should be surrendering. Their leaders should be begging for mercy. Instead, they fought harder with each passing hour. A squadron of human fighters managed to damage the main guns on one champion's cruiser. Another group crippled the engines of a destroyer. The damage was not critical, but it was accumulating. The champion's perfect record was being chipped away. Bit by bit. 8 hours into what should have been a 20-minute battle, Su-bin made a decision that would have shocked every champion's commander in history. She ordered a tactical withdrawal. Not retreat, but a pause to regroup and plan new strategies as the champion's fleet pulled back. Admiral Ji-ho watched them go. His forces had lost 30 ships, but they had achieved something impossible. They had hurt the invincible champions. They had forced them to change their plans. On the champion's flagship, Su-bin stared at her damage reports. 3 ships severely damaged, dozens of fighters lost, hundreds of casualties. It was the worst performance in champion's military history against the weakest enemy they had ever faced. How she whispered to herself, "How did primitives do this to us?" The answer was simple, but Su-bin could not see it yet. The humans had done something no other species had ever tried. They had refused to fight the champions on the champions' terms. Instead, they had fought their own kind of battle, a battle where being smaller and weaker became advantages instead of weaknesses. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light. Imperial communications carried reports to every champion's base. Every conquered world heard whispers that the invincible champions had been forced to retreat. On Valoris, Supreme Marshal Tae-young read Su-bin's report with growing rage. Casualties against primitives, withdrawal from inferior forces. It was impossible. It was shameful. It was unacceptable. He called for his greatest generals and admirals. The humans would pay for this humiliation. The full might of the champion's empire would descend on their pathetic world. They would learn what happened to species that dared to resist. But on Earth, General Yoon Seo studied recordings of the battle with satisfaction. The first phase had worked perfectly. The humans had proven they could hurt. The champions had shown that the invincible empire could bleed. Now came the hard part, making the champions so angry they would make mistakes. The battle had lasted only 1 day, but it had changed everything. The champions had faced their first real challenge in decades. The humans had tasted victory against impossible odds. Both sides now knew this would not be the quick, easy conquest everyone had expected in the depths of space champions. Reinforcements were already moving toward Earth. The largest fleet in galactic history was being assembled to crush these upstart humans once and for all. But the humans were preparing too, turning their entire world into a fortress, and their entire species into an army. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen when unstoppable force met immovable object. The champions had the power, but the humans had something the champions had forgotten how to use: the will to fight against any odds, no matter how hopeless they seemed. The real war was just beginning. Supreme Marshal Tae-young stood before the massive viewing screen in his throne room, watching the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history prepare for departure. 200 warships stretched across space, each one a floating city of death and destruction. 500,000 elite soldiers waited in transport ships ready to crush any resistance. The humiliation at Earth burned in Tae-young's heart like acid. No champion's force had ever been forced to retreat from battle. The very idea was shameful beyond words. These humans would learn the price of defying the eternal empire. Their world would burn as an example to all who might dare resist. Admiral Hyo-jin approached the throne, her face showing the same cold anger that filled every champion's heart. Marshal, the Grand Fleet is ready for departure. Intelligence reports show the humans have reinforced their defenses, but nothing that can stop our full assault. Good Tae-young replied, his voice like grinding stone. We will not repeat Captain Su-bin's mistakes. This time there will be no mercy, no prisoners, no survivors. When we are finished, Earth will be nothing but burning rock and dead space. The Grand Fleet moved through hyperspace faster than light itself, consuming the distance between Valoris and Earth in days instead of years. Never before had the champions committed so much of their military might to conquering a single world. But never before had they faced such an insult to their pride. On Earth, General Yun Seo worked without sleep, coordinating defenses across the entire solar system. She had studied every piece of data from the first battle, learning how the champions fought and how they could be beaten. The humans were badly outnumbered, but they had advantages their enemies did not understand. President J1 visited the command center daily, watching the preparations with growing amazement. The entire human race had united for the first time in history. Every nation, every military force, every resource was focused on a single goal: survival against impossible odds, General. Our long-range sensors show the champions' fleet approaching. Yun Seo's aide reported. They will reach our system in 6 hours, let them come. Yun Seo replied calmly. We are ready, but ready meant something very different to humans than it did to champions. The humans had not built massive space stations or planetary shield generators. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous. Thousands of small hidden bases throughout the solar system. Asteroid mining stations had been converted into weapons platforms. Cargo ships had been fitted with missiles and bombs. Even civilian craft had been armed and given volunteer crews. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a maze of hidden threats. When the Grand Fleet arrived at Earth, they found what looked like a standard defensive formation. Human ships clustered around their homeworld, ready for a final desperate battle. Marshal Tae-young smiled with cold satisfaction. This was more like it. A proper battle where superior force would crush inferior enemies. Begin the assault, he ordered. All ships advance. Destroy everything that moves. The champions' fleet moved forward in perfect formation as they always did, but as soon as they crossed into the inner solar system, the trap was sprung. Human forces attacked from every direction. Hidden bases revealed themselves, firing from asteroid belts and debris fields. Small ships emerged from behind moons and planets, striking at the flanks of the massive champions' formation. Chaos erupted across space. The champions' perfect battle lines meant nothing when enemies appeared above, below, and behind them. Their communication systems, designed for coordinated fleet actions, could not handle attacks coming from dozens of different directions at once. Lieutenant Yu Na, serving on Tai Young's flagship, watched her screen in horror as champions' ships took damage from all sides. This is impossible, she whispered. Where are they all coming from? The humans had learned from their first battle. They knew the champions relied on overwhelming force in direct combat. So instead of meeting force with force, they had chosen to fight like humans had always fought. When facing a stronger enemy, make the battle as confusing and chaotic as possible. Admiral Jiho coordinated the human response from a command ship hidden in the asteroid belt. All units maintain mobility, he ordered. Never stay in one place long enough for them to target you. Hit them hard, then disappear. Human fighters swarmed around the massive champions' ships like angry bees around a bear. They could not match the firepower of their enemies, but they did not need to. They only needed to cause damage, confusion, and fear. Champion ship Eternal Victory shuddered under multiple missile impacts. Captain Min Ho reported from his station, Sir, we have hull breaches in sections 12 through 15. The humans are targeting our weapon systems. How? Do they know our weak points? Marshal Tae-young demanded. It should be impossible for primitives to understand champions' technology. But the humans had been studying champion ships for months, ever since the first battle. Every piece of wreckage, every damaged component had been analyzed and reverse-engineered. Human engineers had found weak spots in champions' armor, vulnerable points in their shields, critical systems that could be disabled with precise attacks. The battle raged for 12 hours, far longer than any champion's engagement in recorded history. Tae-young watched in growing disbelief as his casualties mounted. Human ships were destroyed by the hundreds, but somehow there always seemed to be more. They appeared from hiding places he did not know existed, struck with weapons that should not have been effective, then vanished before his forces could respond. Sub-Commander Park Jin called from the communication station. Marshal, we are receiving damage reports from across the fleet. 16 ships have critical damage. 8 more are requesting permission to withdraw. Withdraw. Tae-young roared. No champion ship withdraws from battle. Destroy these insects. But the insects kept stinging. Human tactics were unlike anything in Champion's experience. They did not fight to win quickly. They fought to keep fighting. Every loss taught them something new about Champion's weaknesses. Every defeat was turned into information for the next attack. Dr. Song-hee, the fleet's chief scientist, approached the marshal with troubling news. Sir, I have analyzed human attack patterns. They are learning our responses faster than we can adapt. Our standard tactics are becoming predictable. The champions had always won through superior technology and overwhelming force. They had never needed to be unpredictable because no enemy had ever lasted long enough to learn their patterns. But humans were different. They treated every battle as a learning experience. As the fighting continued, human forces began to change their tactics in real time. They discovered that champions' ships turned slowly, so they concentrated attacks from multiple angles. They found that champions' communications could be jammed, so they disrupted enemy coordination. They learned and adapted faster than any enemy the champions had ever faced. The humans also did something that shocked every champion's observer. They shared their knowledge instantly. When one human unit discovered a successful attack method, it was immediately transmitted to all other forces. The humans turned their entire military into a single learning organism. By the 18th hour of battle, Marshal Tae-young made the hardest decision of his military career. He ordered a tactical withdrawal to regroup and plan new strategies. It was the second time in Champion's history that their forces had been forced to retreat. Admiral Hyo-jin stared at the damage reports in disbelief. 23 ships destroyed, 57 severely damaged, thousands of elite soldiers dead or wounded against an enemy that should have been crushed in minutes. The humans celebrated their survival. But General Yoon Seo knew the celebration was premature. The champions had more ships, more soldiers, more resources. They would return with new tactics, and the humans would have to learn and adapt even faster. News of the second champion's defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Conquered worlds whispered about the impossible humans who made the mighty champions retreat twice. Small rebellions began breaking out in distant sectors of the empire. On Valoris, champions' leaders met in emergency session. The unthinkable had happened. Their invincible military had been beaten by primitives. Everything they believed about their superiority was being challenged by one small world that refused to surrender. Tae-young studied human military history, trying to understand how such a young, weak species could fight so effectively. What he discovered filled him with a cold dread. The humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years, perfecting the art of warfare through constant conflict. They knew things about battle that the champions had never needed to learn. The champions had grown strong through easy victories, but humans had grown strong through hard defeats. They had learned that losing a battle did not mean losing a war, that retreat could be preparation for counterattack, that sometimes the greatest strength came from admitting weakness and adapting to overcome it. The galaxy watched and waited as two very different philosophies of war prepared for their next clash. The champions believed in strength through superiority, but humans believed in strength through adaptability. The next battle would determine which philosophy would rule the stars.
Professor Kylock's hover transport approached Dohyun Valley on the morning of Day 7. The alien professor had spent most of the night reviewing construction reports and trying to understand what exactly his human student had built. All the data suggested something much more complex than a simple survival shelter, but the readings seemed impossible for just 7 days of work, as his transport crested the ridge that surrounded the valley. Professor Kylock got his first visual confirmation of what Do-yoon had accomplished. His tentacles went completely rigid. With shock rising from the valley floor was what could only be described as a palace. A beautiful fortress that combined elegant architecture with obvious defensive capabilities. The main building was large enough to house dozens of people, but it was designed with such artistic skill that it looked like something an emperor might build for his summer retreat. The curved roof lines swept gracefully upward in the traditional Korean style. but they were made from advanced materials that gleamed in the alien sunlight. Thick walls promised protection from storms or attacks, but they were decorated with carved patterns that turned functional architecture into art steam rows. From several points around the complex indicating active geothermal systems, solar collectors were integrated so seamlessly into the roof design that they looked like decorative elements. Communication towers and sensor arrays added a high-tech appearance without destroying the overall aesthetic beauty gardens with carefully arranged rocks and successfully transplanted local vegetation showed that this was not just functional, but designed by someone who understood that humans needed beauty as well as safety. The pathways leading from the landing area to the main entrance were lined with traditional stone lanterns that provided both lighting and an artistic welcome. Professor Kylock's transport touched down on a perfectly level landing pad that Do-hyun had constructed specifically for visiting aircraft. As the engines shut down, the professor could hear the sound of running water from decorative fountains and the gentle hum of advanced machinery working efficiently in the background. Do-hyun emerged from the main building to greet his professor. He had managed to find time to wash, change into clean clothes, and even get a good night's sleep in his comfortable bedroom. He looked remarkably fresh and relaxed for someone who had just completed a week of intensive construction work. "Welcome, Professor Kylock," Do-hyun said, with a respectful bow in the human tradition. "Would you like a tour of the shelter?" Professor Kylock's translator device made several confused beeping sounds. Before managing to process his response, student Kim, This is not what was requested." Do-hyun smiled politely. "With respect, Professor, you asked for a shelter that could protect one being for 7 cycles on this planet. I believe this structure fulfills those requirements and perhaps provides a few additional safety features." Professor Kylock floated through the main entrance and immediately understood that he was seeing something unprecedented in his 47 years of teaching. The interior was spacious, well-lit, and more comfortable than many luxury hotels he had visited on civilized worlds. The Great Hall featured high ceilings with exposed wooden beams in the Korean tradition, but the wood was treated with preservatives that would last for centuries. The floors were heated, using the geothermal energy and covered with beautiful stone tiles that had been cut and polished from local granite climate control systems, maintained perfect temperature and humidity without any noticeable noise or energy waste. Advanced furniture had been crafted from local materials using traditional woodworking techniques combined with modern ergonomic design. Everything was beautiful, functional, and built to last for generations. "How did you accomplish all this in just 7 days?" Professor Kylock asked, waving his tentacles in amazement. "Efficient planning, good preparation, and perhaps a few very long workdays," Do-hyun replied. "Also, I brought construction robots that could work continuously while I slept, and the local materials turned out to be even better quality than the surveys indicated." They moved through the complex, and Professor Kylock's amazement grew with each room, a fully equipped kitchen with refrigeration systems that could preserve food for months, a workshop area with manufacturing capabilities that could produce almost anything needed for survival or comfort, a communications center that could contact anywhere in the galaxy with crystal-clear reception. The bedrooms were designed for comfort with soft furniture climate control that could be adjusted individually, and even entertainment systems for relaxation. The storage areas could hold enough supplies for a small community, but it was the bathroom that left Professor Kylock completely speechless. The shower area was a masterpiece that combined advanced engineering with spa-like luxury. Multiple water jets could be adjusted independently for pressure, temperature, and spray pattern. The hot water supply was virtually unlimited thanks to the direct tap into the geothermal springs. Towel warmers heated floors, and even a small relaxation area with a carved stone soaking tub completed the ensemble. "This is impossible," Professor Kylock muttered, staring at shower controls that were more sophisticated than those in the best hotels on his home planet. You built a luxury resort in 7 days. Do-hyun activated the shower system to demonstrate how it worked. Perfect temperature water flowed from multiple directions, creating a bathing experience that was both refreshing and deeply relaxing. The entire system was designed for maximum comfort, while using geothermal energy so efficiently that it could run continuously without any environmental impact. Technically, Professor, it is still a shelter, Do-hyun said as steam rose around them. It just happens to be a very comfortable and well-equipped shelter, Professor. Kylox realized that he was looking at something that would change how survival engineering was taught throughout the galaxy. This human student had not just met the assignment requirements, he had redefined what those requirements could mean, but the most impressive thing was not the luxury features or the advanced technology. It was the obvious care and attention to detail that had gone into every aspect of the construction. Every joint was perfect, every surface was smooth, every system worked with quiet efficiency. This was not the work of someone showing off or trying to impress people. This was the work of someone who believed that if you were going to build something, you should build it as well as possible. Student. Kim, Professor Kylox said, "Finally, I must ask you a direct question. Was this truly built as a survival shelter? Or were you trying to demonstrate your species' capabilities?" Do-hyun considered the question seriously. "Professor, when humans are faced with a challenge, we do not just try to meet the minimum requirements. We ask ourselves, what is possible? What would make this situation better? How can we improve things not just for ourselves, but for anyone who might benefit from our work?" He gestured toward the complex. This shelter could house and support a research team for years. If other students needed emergency shelter, there is room for them. If future classes need a base camp for planetary studies, it is here. I did not just build something for 7 days. I built something that could be useful for decades. Professor Kylox was quiet for a long time. His tentacles had turned a deep purple color which indicated deep thought and growing respect. Finally, he spoke. "Student Kim, you have taught me something very important today. Sometimes the most appropriate response to a simple request is an extraordinary effort." What the professor did not yet realize was that word of Do-hyun's shelter was about to spread throughout the entire university and change everything.